before you go getting all crazy, why don't you pick up the phone, call Christine, and find out what it's all about?
That's a good idea.
For a certain generation of TV fans, Coach is one of those comfort shows that instantly takes you back. You can almost hear the crowd noise from the Minnesota State Screaming Eagles, see Hayden Fox pacing the sidelines, and picture Luther and Dauber bumbling around the locker room like two overgrown kids. It ran for 9 seasons, crossed the 200-episode mark, and quietly became one of ABC's most reliable sitcoms of the late 80s and early 90s. But behind all the small-town football charm and laugh track, Coach was a lot stranger than you might remember. The fictional school wasn't where you think it was. The lead actress had already starred with Elvis and topped the music charts. One of the dumb jocks went on to voice one of the most famous cartoon characters in the world. And at one point, there was even a modern reboot that got canned before a single episode ever made it to air. So in this video, we're counting down 15 weird facts about Coach that you probably never knew. If you love digging into the wild behind-the-scenes stories of retro TV, be sure to hit like, subscribe to Throwback Network, and let's kick off from number 15. 15. The reboot that got sacked before it even aired. Let's start with a weird one from way after the original show ended. In the mid-2010s, a major network actually ordered a Coach revival. The idea was that Hayden Fox's son would now be the head coach at a small college, with Hayden coming out of retirement to help him run the program. Craig T. Nelson signed on to reprise his iconic role, and several episodes were reportedly ordered straight to series. On paper, it sounded like a safe nostalgia play. But behind the scenes, things didn't go so smoothly. There were rumblings about creative disagreements, a pilot that didn't quite land, and a general sense that no one could capture the tone of the original series. Instead of quietly fixing things, the network made a much harsher call. They pulled the plug before the new Coach ever hit the air. So yes, there's technically a lost Coach revival out there, filmed but never broadcast. In a strange way, the cancellation might have been a mercy. It leaves the original show's finale as the real ending, instead of tacking on a revival that didn't live up to the legacy. 14. The finale hides a secret Newhart multiverse joke. By the time Coach wrapped up, creator Barry Kemp had already made a name for himself with another beloved sitcom, Newhart. That show famously ended with one of the greatest TV twists of all time, revealing that the entire series had been a dream of Bob Newhart's character from his earlier show. So when Coach approached its own finale, the writers decided to sneak in a little inside joke. In Leaving Orlando, Hayden returns to his familiar cabin getaway, only to find unexpected squatters, Larry, Daryl, and Daryl, the famously odd trio from Newhart. They don't get a big explanation, and the moment is played quickly, but it's a clear nod to Kemp's earlier series. It's like a tiny shared universe crossover, buried in the final moments of Coach. If you watch the shows casually, it probably just felt like a random gag with some weird guys at a cabin. But for fans who loved Newhart, it was a quiet little tip of the cap, connecting these two sitcom worlds in a way that felt perfectly strange and perfectly Barry Kemp. 13. The Vegas crossover stunt nobody really wanted. In the 90s, networks did some strange things to grab attention during sweeps periods and big competition nights. One of the weirdest involved Coach being thrown into a crossover circus it never really asked for. At one point, ABC staged a big Las Vegas theme night, where multiple sitcoms would tie into the same Sin City setting in an attempt to create buzz and keep viewers glued to the channel. Shows like The Drew Carey Show and others played along with the gimmick, but behind the scenes, not everybody was thrilled. Craig T. Nelson was reportedly not a fan of turning Coach into a stunt show just to chase ratings. So while characters from Coach turned up in the Vegas crossover, the main series itself mostly kept one foot out of the chaos. The result is this oddly lopsided event where Coach is technically part of the party, but also seems to be rolling its eyes at the whole thing. If you ever caught episodes from that night and thought, wait, why is this guy from Coach wandering around Vegas? You weren't alone. It's one of the strangest, most forced cross-promotion attempts of the era. 12. Dauber grew up to be Patrick Star. To most Coach fans, Michael Dauber Dubinsky is the lovable, not-so-bright assistant coach who's always just a step behind everyone else. He's tall, gentle, and kind of lives in his own world. So of course, it's perfect that the actor who played him, Bill Fagerbakke, went on to voice one of the most famously clueless animated characters of all time, Patrick Star from SpongeBob SquarePants. If you listen closely, you can absolutely hear the overlap. That deep, booming, slightly confused delivery that made Dauber so endearing is dialed up to 11 as Patrick. It's almost like someone dropped Hayden's assistant coach into a pineapple under the sea and gave him a pair of swim trunks. What's funny is that for a lot of younger viewers, Patrick is the starting point. They discover SpongeBob first, and only years later stumble on old episodes of Coach and go, wait, is that Patrick? It's one of those casting connections that makes you see both characters differently, and it adds a whole new layer to Dauber's lovable goofiness. 11. Even Hayden didn't know Dauber's real name. For a guy who spent years on the coaching staff, Dauber is weirdly mysterious. Everyone calls him by his nickname, and that's just part of the vibe. But at one point, the show reveals that his real name is actually Michael Dubinsky. The twist is that almost no one uses it, and Hayden, who has worked with him forever, is genuinely thrown when it comes up. There's a great little gag where someone refers to him as Michael, and Hayden has absolutely no idea who they're talking about. It's not dramatic. It doesn't change anything, and it's never treated like a big emotional moment. It's just this casual reminder that Dauber is the kind of guy who blends into the background so much that even his boss forgets he has a legal first and last name. What makes this so wonderfully weird is that it fits his character perfectly. Dauber is the eternal sidekick, always on the sidelines, always a half step behind. He's essential to the show's chemistry, but also just disconnected enough that his real identity feels like trivia, even to the people he works with every day. 10. Hayden's all-American daughter was born in Zimbabwe. On screen, Claire Carey's character Kelly Fox feels like the ultimate Midwestern college kid. She's Hayden's daughter. She shows up with that grounded, down-to-earth energy, and she fits perfectly into the world of Minnesota State and small-town football life. So it surprises a lot of fans to learn that Carey herself was born in Zimbabwe. Before settling into her TV career in the United States, Carey spent part of her childhood overseas. But when she auditioned for Coach, the producers saw her as the most believable version of Hayden's daughter. Someone who could balance his gruffness with warmth, and who felt like she truly grew up in that never-ending autumn that every sitcom college town seems to live in. It's one of those odd casting quirks where the person who feels the most authentically American on screen actually has one of the more international backstories in real life. The fact that viewers just accept her as pure Midwest is a testament to how naturally she slid into the role. 9. Christine secretly had a #1 hit. Before Coach Shelley Fabares is unforgettable as Christine, the smart, sophisticated TV anchor who somehow falls for Hayden Fox's grumpy, football-obsessed life. But long before she was trading banter with Craig T. Nelson, Fabares was already a pop culture star. In the early 1960s, she released a single called Johnny Angel, and it went straight to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. That's right, Hayden's love interest was once a teen pop sensation. At a time when girl group sounds and crooner ballads were dominating radio, she slipped in with a dreamy hit that became an anthem for young listeners. By the time Coach rolled around, most viewers had no idea they were watching a former chart topper. It adds a strange extra layer to Christine's character. This isn't just some random fictional news anchor. She's being played by someone who literally conquered the music world decades earlier. If you ever rewatch Coach and then pull up Johnny Angel, it feels like discovering a secret bonus track attached to the show. 8. She also co-starred with Elvis Presley. 3 times, Shelley Fabares didn't just sing a hit single. She also spent a good chunk of the 60s starring opposite one of the biggest icons in entertainment history, Elvis Presley. She appeared with him in multiple films, including Girl Happy, Spin Out, and Clambake. In those movies, she played the cute, wholesome love interest in the kind of beachy, musical adventures that defined Elvis's later film career. So when you watch Christine sparring with Hayden, you're watching somebody who was once part of the Elvis machine, the big, glossy studio productions designed to showcase the king at his most charming. That's a wild trajectory. From sharing scenes with Elvis to anchoring the news in a fictional Minnesota town and dealing with a football coach who can barely express his feelings. It makes Christine feel even more glamorous in hindsight. Underneath that professional, composed exterior is a performer with a seriously stacked resume. And while Coach never leans into that history, it's hard not to think about it when you realize that Hayden's partner used to be serenaded by rock and roll royalty. 7. Dick Van Dyke's Blink and You Miss It cameo. Jerry Van Dyke's presence on Coach is a big part of what makes the show so memorable. As Luther Van Dam, he's the perfect counterbalance to Hayden. Lovable, scatterbrained, and constantly just a bit out of his depth. But at one point, the series sneaks in a little Easter egg involving his far more famous brother, Dick Van Dyke. In a Christmas-themed episode, there's a quick party scene where Dick shows up in the background as a guest. There's no big announcement, no very special episode fanfare, and no drawn-out cameo with a winking explanation. He's just there. Meanwhile, Luther insists he's not related to anyone important, which makes the moment even funnier if you know what you're looking at. A lot of casual viewers never noticed. If you weren't paying attention, it might have just felt like another extra in a crowded holiday gathering. But for fans who recognized that face instantly, it was a delightful, bizarre little in-joke. A moment where the Van Dyke brothers briefly shared a sitcom universe without making a big fuss about it. 6. Jerry Van Dyke finally got a hit. In his late 50s, Jerry Van Dyke's road to Coach was not smooth. Earlier in his career, he starred in a series that's become infamous on worst TV shows ever lists. My Mother the Car, a surreal sitcom where his character's deceased mother is reincarnated as a talking automobile. The show bombed, and Jerry spent years as a respected but rarely spotlighted performer. By the time Coach came along, he was in his late 50s, and the character of Luther Van Dam was written specifically with him in mind. Suddenly, the guy who had been the punchline of TV trivia was now part of one of the most beloved sitcoms on the air. Luther wasn't just comic relief. He was the heart of the show's underdog charm. There's something really satisfying about that turnaround. In a series about second chances, rebuilding programs, and late career redemption, Jerry Van Dyke was living that story in real life. Coach didn't just give him a job. It gave him the defining role of his career, decades after most actors would expect their big break to have passed. 5. Nelson and Van Dyke had to grow into their chemistry. On screen, Hayden and Luther feel like they've known each other forever. They bicker, they misunderstand each other, and they somehow always end up on the same side when it really counts. But off-screen, Craig T. Nelson and Jerry Van Dyke didn't instantly slip into that easy chemistry. Early on, Nelson had a reputation for being intense and a bit guarded, while Van Dyke came from a looser, more old-school comedy background. They had to figure out how to meet in the middle. Over time, that initial distance actually paid off. The slight tension between them became part of the magic. Hayden as the gruff, no-nonsense head coach, Luther as the well-meaning assistant who never quite gets the respect he wants. As the series went on, you can feel that chemistry deepen. The jokes land harder, the emotional beats between them feel more genuine, and the relationship starts to mirror that of two co-workers who have spent years in the trenches together. It's a weird case where the behind-the-scenes process made the on-screen friendship even more believable. 4. Craig T. Nelson thought he blew the audition. It's almost impossible to picture anyone but Craig T. Nelson as Hayden Fox. He's got that perfect mix of stubborn, sarcastic, warm when he absolutely has to be energy that defines the character. But when he first auditioned for the role, Nelson reportedly thought he'd completely blown it. According to stories from the time, he walked out of the audition convinced the network wasn't interested. Maybe the room felt cold. Maybe the feedback wasn't enthusiastic. Or maybe he was just in his own head. Either way, he left figuring Coach wasn't going to be his show. Then the phone rang. The network wanted him. Whatever doubts he had didn't match what the execs were seeing. They saw their guy, the anchor who could sell both the jokes and the emotional beats. It's one of those classic Hollywood stories where an actor's worst self-criticism turns out to be totally wrong. And in this case, the failure audition led to one of the most perfectly cast sitcom leads of the era. 3. The fake Minnesota State beat real schools to the name. When Coach first aired, Minnesota State University didn't exist in real life. It was a made-up institution created just for the show. A fictional program the writers could mold however they wanted, without worrying about real-world stats or scandals. Then reality caught up. Years later, actual colleges in Minnesota began rebranding, adopting the Minnesota State University name. Suddenly, what started as a TV invention became a real label on real campuses. Students could actually say they went to Minnesota State, and somewhere, Hayden Fox probably would have taken credit for it. There's something delightfully odd about a sitcom beating the real world to a university name. Usually TV shows are the ones borrowing from reality. In this case, the arrow points the other way. The pretend school of the Screaming Eagles ended up feeling eerily prophetic, like the writers accidentally called their shot on higher education branding. 2. The theme song was tied to marching band bragging rights. The Coach theme song has that big, brassy college football feel. The kind of tune you could easily imagine a marching band blasting out across a crisp autumn field. And that wasn't an accident. The show leaned into that vibe so much that a real-life college marching band ended up closely associated with the music. There was a contest tied to the show where college bands got to perform the theme, turning a simple TV opening into a point of pride and competition. For one lucky program, it wasn't just another piece in the repertoire. It became their claim to fame in the world of pop culture and TV trivia. Even if you never saw the contest, you can hear why Coach inspired that kind of thing. The theme sounds less like a sitcom jingle and more like something you'd hear at halftime. It's a weird but fitting crossover, a fake college football show whose music spilled out into real-world college football culture. 1. Minnesota State was actually filmed in Iowa, and Hayden's name is a clue. Finally, our number one weird fact about Coach takes us back to the very foundations of the show. Literally. Those scenic shots of Minnesota State you see sprinkled throughout the series, they weren't filmed in Minnesota at all. The production actually used the campus of the University of Iowa for exteriors. That's not just a random choice. Creator Barry Kemp went to Iowa, and the show is, in many ways, a tribute to that football culture. Even Hayden Fox's name is a nod to real-life Iowa coaching legend Hayden Fry. So while the show insists we're in Minnesota, the DNA of Coach is pure Iowa from the ground up. It's one of those details that fans in the area spotted instantly, while everyone else just accepted the illusion. The banners said, Minnesota. The story said Minnesota. But the bricks, the stadium, and the spirit? Those belong to a different state entirely, one that quietly shaped the world of Coach from behind the scenes. Conclusion. For a show that looks pretty straightforward on the surface, football, family, a cranky coach with a secretly big heart, Coach hides a surprising amount of weirdness under the hood. You've got a fictional university that accidentally predicted real campus names, an all-American daughter who was born in Zimbabwe, a lead actress who once sang a #1 hit and co-starred with Elvis, and a sidekick who grew up to be Patrick Star. Add in the Lost reboot, the crossover stunts, the Sly Newhart connection, and the Iowa roots hiding beneath all that Minnesota branding. And suddenly, Coach feels a lot more layered than just another 90s hangout sitcom. It's a time capsule packed with strange choices, hidden jokes, and careers that went in directions nobody could have predicted. If any of these facts surprised you, or if you spotted one of these details back when the show first aired, let me know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the weird side of your favorite retro TV shows, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Throwback Network, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next.